Hi guys, I'm here with Rob Walling. Rob is an online entrepreneur. He's got a couple different things going right now. One is Hittail for organic SEO, and the other is Drip that's about to kick off, and that's for managing drip campaigns for online businesses. How you doing, Rob?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh yeah, it's good to have you. So today, Rob and I are going to talk a little bit about. He's had a lot of different experiences through the years optimizing businesses online. Specifically, we're going to talk about conversion and retention. And our basic assumptions today are, that you're looking to optimize a software as a service application. So a lot of the tactics may be applicable to other types of online businesses, but that's the angle we're coming from. Um, so just to kick it off real quick, Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been working on lately and where your perspective is on this stuff.
Sure. Yeah, so for about the past 20 months, I've been working on, improving retentions and conversions on a SaaS app called Hittail. Like you said, it's kind of an organic SEO keyword tool. And I acquired that about 20 months ago, and I've really been focused on it. Since it was an acquisition, I didn't have to build a lot. There were a few months of revamp, but most of the reworking of it was just fixing bugs and then actually doing a lot of the sales side and marketing site redesign to try to plug hole. There were so many holes in the funnel. So this really is kind of top of mind for me right now. And as I'm transitioning into the new app we're launching called Drip, I'm already keenly aware of, I just have a landing page up right now, but I'm already keenly aware of getting positioning down and split testing and trying to retain visitors just to that landing page, right? Just trying to get them to provide their email and that kind of
Right,
stuff. So,
right, and that's a good example of where retention's not always retaining existing paying customers, but you want to retain people at every level of the funnel.
right.
Um, okay, so if you have an app, especially something like Hittail where you made an acquisition, how do you go about evaluating something like that to decide where you need to focus? I mean, because there's conversion and retention, but there are a lot of other activities involved too.
Right. So there's like front end marketing, which is getting people to the site. That's kind
Right.
of step one. I think about it in four steps. There's the front end marketing that gets visitors to your site. There's convincing them that you provide enough value that it's worth their time to start a trial. That's step two. Let's assume you have a trial, right? Since we're talking SaaS. Then there's providing enough value during that trial that they move into the paid category, right? They become a customer. They're willing to give you money because you provide them so much value. So that's step three. And then step four is providing enough value on an ongoing basis that they stick around. That's retention. So it's marketing, trial conversion, paid conversion, and retention. And the way that I look at it is really going through those four steps. So if I had a brand new website with zero traffic, you have to get traffic before you can worry about anything else because until you have someone in your trial or paid or retention funnel, you don't know what to do, right, to optimize that.
Right.
With Hittail, when I acquired it, it had a few thousand uniques a month. It was between 2 and 3,000, let's say. And so I didn't need to do marketing right then because I was getting a couple thousand a month, but the conversion to trial was abysmal. It was really low. And then the conversion to paid was even lower. So I knew that those were the two steps that I had to focus on, even way before I worried about retention. It was just I need to get more people into those trial and paid steps so that I have enough data to focus on retention. Because until you have hundreds of people a month, you just can't learn enough. You can't learn quickly enough through those steps.
Right. So when you're looking at trial to paid and then also uh, getting people to actually start those trials, do you do those at the same time or are those separate stages as an effort?
Those were separate stages, and that's typically how I would attack it because they really are different. It's an entirely different mindset. If you think about when you visit a new website and you're thinking, should I try this out? That's much more of a marketing job, right? You're actually trying to figure out what the positioning is, what the value prop is, how do I communicate that kind of stuff. Once they're in a trial, you're not trying to convince them that you can provide value. You're actually trying to provide that value. And so it's a whole different step. It's much more it's deeper education of how the app works. It's deeper education of the value that it provides, and it's a lot of hand holding. That's where even like one-on-one, having a VA who can install some tracking code for them or do actual things for them takes place. And so I don't do them at the same time because even for me, it's a whole different mindset. It's kind of going from marketing to like support and onboarding.
Right. Okay. So I want to jump in a little bit on the tools that you use to do that, but also before we get there, it occurred to me we talked, in the abstract about how to do these things, but what is one or two examples of each? How do you set something up to improve, education for people to get them to start a trial, and then once they're inside of the app, what's an example of, increasing that engagement, increasing them wanting to go ahead and go paid?
Sure. Well, in terms of education specifically, the thing I found that works the best to get someone to start a trial is an email mini course. Like, I mean, yeah, you would figure, right? I'm building a
Sure.
whole tool to do this.
Right.
So, getting someone to convincing them that, hey, I have something of value for you that's either a PDF report or a toolkit to do something, or even just here's a 5-day course on how to do long tail SEO, and it's free. Give us your email and we'll send that to you. That has absolutely impacted the bottom line. And once you do it once, it's just a flywheel, so it keeps going month after month. So that's kind of from the trial to, I'm sorry, that's visits to trials. From trial to paid, it's similar. It's either, well, most of the time I will create a short screencast and write a little couple sentence write up of a key point, a key misunderstanding that people have about our tool. It's kind of a frequently asked question thing that is causing people to cancel. And then during the trial, we will email that to them. So email does tend to be the delivery mechanism, though I suppose you could have, something that pops up in your app or something to do
Right.
that. But the way I've done it is, and it's been effective for us, is to, send them an email with, hey, I bet you have one question, or do you confuse Hittail and Google Analytics? That's a very common thing, and that's one of the subject lines of ours, is like the difference between Hittail and Google
Okay.
Analytics, and then we provide education about how to do that.
Right. Okay. So I know, speaking directly to the email courses, that Patrick McKenzie has a course on doing exactly that. Are you aware of any other like big resources if you wanted to get started with an email course?
Not yet. I with Drip, part of the marketing we're going to be doing is creating stuff like that. But yeah, nothing that I know. Which actually, there's a gap in the market, to be honest, as
Right.
I've looked around.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you get that going, send me an email. We'll put that in some notes.
Sure.
But let's go ahead and talk about tools. So when you've decided to focus on convention or conversion and retention, uh, what tools are you using to see the funnel and decide where you need to put your effort and if it's working or not?
Yeah, I think tools. I will talk about the tools that I use, but I think the tools are actually less relevant than what metrics you're looking at. Because you can look at them in a custom dashboard, you can look at them in Google Analytics, you can look at them in Kissmetrics, all these different things. But really, in my experience, you need to know which numbers to look at, which are the most relevant. And there's four that I use. And I look at these every day. Every day, 7 days a week, I wake up and like on my phone, I refresh that thing. I mean, it's one of the first things I look at. It's your visitor to trial conversion, your trial to paid conversion. These are percentages. It's your churn rate, which is a percentage of people who canceled during the month, and then the lifetime value of your customers over the past, however, I do it over the past 30 days. It's a rolling average thing. But those are really the only four numbers that I need. I have a dashboard with probably, I don't know, 20 different numbers, but those are the four that are most important to me. And that lifetime value, having that calculating on the fly all the time is really interesting because as your churn fluctuates, that number moves a lot, and
Right.
it really shows you how these things are impacted. Um, so that's kind of, I think those are the core numbers, and I don't really think it matters how you get to them. But the way I get to them is I do use Google Analytics, and I wire up goals, several different goals. That's a great global view. If you want to dig into it, then you need a tool like Kissmetrics, and I think is it Mixpanel is the other one. I don't
Yes.
use it,
Yeah.
but those are kind of competitors. I've just always used Kissmetrics because of my relationship with Heaton. But that helps you visualize your funnel, and then when I want to really dive into a single page, how to improve conversions, I'll use a tool called Inspectlit, and it allows you to do both the heat mapping of where someone clicks, but it also allows you to record actual mouse
Sessions.
pointers. Yep, and it's much less expensive. Like ClickTail, I think is like 100 or 200 bucks a month, and this
Okay.
is like $15. So it's a less
Right.
expensive way to record sessions. And then
What do you when you have those sessions, like how many
mhm.
will you actually go through?
I'll go through. I typically will record for maybe 3 days, 4 days, depending on how many people are hitting that page, and then I will step through them. You can step through them at high speed. You know, you kind of double or triple speed it, and I'll go through maybe 30 in a day, 40 in a day. Even if there, I mean, there may be a few hundred recorded, but after a while, you start seeing the patterns of
Right.
what people are doing. And then, yeah, that's it. And then I have a custom dashboard, and all that is it's a really ugly white background with Times New Roman font, and it's about 20 different horribly written SQL queries that I hack together. And that's all you like. It doesn't have to be fancy. I just need to know what is that lifetime value. It's a dollar amount, right? It doesn't matter how pretty it is. So those are the basic things that I use to keep track of where things are and to try and to know what to focus on, to be honest.
Right. Okay. Very cool. Uh, okay, so why don't you lay out a little bit of you know where you were when you started with Hittail, and I'd like to talk a little about how you approached improving your conversion and improving that funnel between those four different things.
Sure. Yeah, so when I acquired Hittail, like I said, the front end of the funnel was a couple thousand uniques a month, and a conversion to trial wasn't bad. I was trying to think of where it was. It was probably, well, it was it was in 1 or 2% maybe to
Okay.
trial, but the problem is they were not asking for credit card up front, and so
Right.
that's a real problem, right? Because then you don't convert very many people to paid. So the trial to paid was abysmal, and then retention was the interesting thing is retention was pretty high, but only because most of the people who were using it had been there for years. And the longer term your customers are, the higher your retention tends to be.
Right.
People tend to churn in the first 2, 3, 4 months, and then past that, your retention rate, I'm sorry, your churn rate goes way down. So that's where I started. It wasn't in very good shape, and I knew that I had to fix the funnel first, and then if I drove more traffic to the front end of it, that I'd probably, hopefully, be able to convert a lot more people.
Right. So it sounds like you were happy with a couple thousand uniques to start with on the traffic side.
Yeah.
What numbers did you have in mind as far as the conversion to trial and
Yep.
then to paid? What
Yep.
seems healthy?
Yeah. So my thing is that if you're in doubt, you should always default to asking for the credit card before the trial. That's where I default. I'm not saying it works all the time, but it's probably 90% of the time it's the better choice. And so I default to that and then test later if I have time, right? Test without credit card. And so with credit card, I want it depends on the traffic source, but site wide, I want a 1 to 2% conversion to trial. That's from uniques to trials. Now, some traffic sources will literally be at 5 or 6% if they're heavily aligned. So that means, 5 out of every 100 people who visits will start a trial. That's awesome. But then you're going to have some that are just crap. And so you want to average between 1 and 2%. And then trial to paid, if you're asking for a credit card, you want to be between 40 and 60% trial to paid. Now, I know the apps that are at 75% trial to paid, but those are outliers. They also don't have any tracking code to install. Now, with Hittail, you have to install this little
Right.
snippet of JavaScript or a tag that instantly lowers you because a certain percentage will just never install that. So that's where the 40 to 60 comes in. You can have a successful app with 35, but I don't know of anybody who's really below 40 who is growing quickly. That's kind of where you need to be. And then retention or churn. Let's talk about churn a little bit. You know, Big businesses that grow really fast, like Salesforce or I don't know, big SaaS, HubSpot, or maybe a big hosting company, they're going to have churn rates, post 60-day churn rates of 2%. 1.5 to 2.5%, and that's where ideally you'd be. But I don't know any small SaaS apps that are like that. Most of the ones I see are between 5 and 8%, and that's kind of where you want to get your churn. That's monthly churn rate. That's post 60-day monthly churn rate, because pre 60-day you'll have 20 to 25% easy can cancel on you. It's because there's just a lot of volatility there. So those are rough guidelines. Obviously, you're going to be some people higher or lower or whatever, but it gives you at least an idea of if you're not within those ranges, you need to worry about how to get into those ranges. Like that's what you should be focusing on.
Right. Okay. Um, so what when you started out looking at those numbers was your first sort of concrete idea to deal with the conversion rate from uh, visitor to trial?
Well, the first thing, I mean, even before I knew the conversion rate from visitor to trial, I knew
Right.
that the site had to be redesigned. Like it was just
Hmm.
so obvious. It was an old, it was only 6-year-old design, but it looked like it was 10 years old. So redesigning the site had to happen because I wanted it to look like a modern SaaS app, and it didn't. Then once I learned more concretely about the user flow, because I acquired it, and then I got access to Google Analytics, and I could kind of see what people were doing. I knew that I had to do a couple things. One, I had to reduce the number of options. So you used to land on the homepage and there were like there's a bazillion links and there's just text and it's all the same size. I mean, just basic fundamental design things were being violated. So I really wanted people to either be able to go to the pricing page or sign up for a trial, and that's kind of it, right? Or take a tour or go to the pricing page, which allows them to sign up for the trial. So kind of reduce the number of paths they can go down, and you guide them through that. And I was, using buttons and text and stuff, super clear about the path that I wanted them to take. The next thing was to reduce sign up friction. So instead of having 15 to 20 fields in the registration form, I pulled it down to essentially 3 fields, just email, password, and the domain name. Then I added in credit cards that added 3 more. But I went from 15 to 20 to about 6 fields,
Right.
and made it just a lower, it's a lower friction process. And then the other way, so that just improved the funnel. It just meant more people could find their way to the pricing page. And even on the tour page, if they did go to the tour page is this little carousel you can click through that shows you the features and the benefits. And when you get to the last one, it says, "Awesome! I hope you love it. Now go check out our pricing page." Even there, it's a path. It all ends at that pricing page. And so once I got them through to there, the conversion rate of people who hit the site to made it to trial was improved, and I was asking for credit cards, so that was nice. Um, and then in terms of just overall kind of blanket ways to do it, the other 2 ways I found are to add an email mini course. It just captures another, instead of only getting that 1 to 2%, you capture between 5 and 20% into an email course, and then you're able to communicate with them and provide them value and educate them, and
Right.
they're just more likely you're going to convert more people. And then the last thing is retargeting, which is just putting a little putting a little tracking pixel or a little image ad on your website, and it allows people to then see ads when they go to other websites to come back. So it's just trying to increase that overall conversion rate.
Okay. So did you do all those things at once, or was that in stages?
That was in stages. The first thing of just improving the funnel, the kind of making the path clear and making the friction reduced, that was all in one stage. And then I looped back after I had time to, because creating the mini course isn't, a non-trivial task. So
Sure.
I looped back and did that. And then I kind of discovered retargeting a couple months later. So each one was an incremental, it's just enough. But if you move that number, if it's at 1% and you increase it by 10%, then you're at 1.1, and then
Right.
another 10%, you're at 1.2, and it's just like that's how I saw it step up. The major one was that redesign because which was expensive and time consuming, but it instantly made a huge difference. And then the other ones were more incremental.
Okay. Um, so what about retention with Hittail? I know we talked about the sort of 5 to 8% number. What kinds of things did you try to do to improve that?
Yeah, so when I acquired the app, as soon as I started sending people, I had the new and improved funnel, reduce friction, and I was getting people in to try the app, and just bleeding customers both out of the trial, and even if they became paid, it was twice the numbers that it needed to be. My churn was up at 15% or some ridiculous number. You just can't even begin to grow a business with a churn of 15% a month. So what I did is I had my virtual assistant email every customer who canceled for, I think it was 30 days. It might have been 14 days, but it was just, I said for a set period of time, email everybody, not only who canceled their paid account, but who didn't convert to paid, like who canceled during the trial, right? Who shut the account down. And I had them create two separate sheets in a Google spreadsheet, one for the, the trial cancellations and one for the paid. And just said, what were your objections? Like, really, why did you cancel? And tried to dig into it more than we have on the cancellation form. We have a why did you cancel thing, but we get junk through that. It's typically really short sentences and that didn't have much of a reason. And with this email, people were much more likely to share more in-depth thoughts. And what we found is there were, he emailed, it was several hundred people, and we were able to group those into maybe 15 different objections, 15 to 17, I don't know. And it was kind of like, it was all circling around these basic themes of people didn't know how to install our tag. I called it tracking code earlier, but it's just a tag, right? It's a JavaScript tag.
Sure.
And people didn't know how. They didn't want to spend the time. They wanted to get value out of it before they installed it. So there was friction around installing that thing, more so than I thought there would be. And then there was an educational-ish element where people were like, well, this looks just like the keyword list in Google Analytics. And it's not, but that's an education issue. First I got upset and I was like, these users, they don't know what they're, but it was like, no, that's my issue. I'm the entrepreneur. I need to solve that. I need to educate them. It's my responsibility. So it was stuff like that came up. And so what we did is we heartily encouraged installation of that tag because we knew that was the first thing that had to get fixed. When I acquired Hittail, it was around 20% installation rate of that tag for people who signed up for a trial. And by the time we were done, we were at about 70 to 75%. So it's a dramatic increase, right? And that was done via email, purely via email. And actually, we also put a blank slate page. If you logged into the app, it basically says like you can't do anything until you do this, and here are the instructions. Right. Or click here, and we will do it for you. That's the point where I got right. I had a virtual assistant, and I said, "Hey, let's start charging $10 or $20 to get this installed." And then I realized I'm nickel and dime in here because if someone actually signs up, my lifetime value is so much more than that. They're like, why? If I can afford it, let's just install it for free. And so we do. So now we install tracking code. For free, and then we also, if you're in a trial and you're not sending us results, we know your tracking code is not installed, and we email you, I think 4 days in a row, and we basically say in different ways like, do you need help? How can we help? Do you have questions? Let's get that installed. So that was the way we got that part up, and that which dramatically increased the number of people who converted to paid. And then the other thing I talked about, people confusing it with Google Analytics or just not understanding how it works or what it's doing, that was done via a sequence of emails during the trial that just educated. I created some screencasts, answered. It was pretty obvious what the frequently asked questions were, and we had those questions already answered in the FAQ, but no one goes to looks for that, right? You have to go and say, here, here's this question and here's the answer. So those were the two key points. We also added a downsell, like if people go to cancel and they are below a certain level, we say, hey, you know what, we actually have a cheaper plan that you can downgrade to. So that did a decent job. I won't say that's moved the needle, but it definitely makes me feel better because we have less cancellations.
Right. Yeah, sometimes things are more psychological anyway than
that's right.
necessarily hard. So I think I heard you talk a little bit about sort of doing the whole thing again, right? So we had these 4 stages that you go through to get customers into the app and retain them, and eventually you have healthy numbers. But how does doing this again look in a business that's more mature like that? What are you thinking, and how do you approach it?
Well, yeah, so I approached it the same. We knew that there were still people canceling, and we emailed them and got their info. But this time there was less low-hanging fruit. It was things that were bigger tickets this time, right? Like we weren't just going to be able to create a screencast and send them an email. It's like there's either a whole feature that's missing or there's something that needs to be dramatically rewritten in a way to retain more people. And so it's a lot. My experience was it was a lot more effort the second time around. And in fact, we didn't implement everything. I know that we could improve some retention a little more, but some of the things just are going to take too much time. Like a massive integration with Google Analytics was one that would solve some key things, but I mean, it would literally be weeks worth of development work, and we're just, busy with other stuff right now. So that was the basics. What I did find is that the email sequence had performed well, but there were still some things weren't at the right sent at the right time, and so I tweaked that, and that helped. And the one thing we did bite off, and a big lesson I learned was try not to add items to your customer's to-do list,
Right.
right? If you think about like what a keyword tool does, it gives you these suggestions that you should create content around. And so a lot, still one of the big objections the second round was I almost feel guilty that I'm paying for Hittail because I'm not writing articles. And so that was it was a non-trivial thing for us to do, but we went out and integrated with an article marketplace through an API, and we allow one-click articles now. So not only does that generate a little bit of revenue for us, but it took that item off their to-do list so that if they do in fact get a suggestion, they can click it and in a few days get an article back. And so every app you can climb that ladder of value delivery, right? It's like if you have a tool, SaaS app that helps people do user documentation, you can offer them that, but then offer a concierge service where like we will write your user documentation for 1,000 or 2,000 or three. You know, I mean, you need to get
Right.
value for it, but then it will actually retain people a lot longer. So that was kind of I felt like that's not low hanging fruit at all, but that's how you take that mature business and really start multiplying it. I think without that article feature, we would have had a tough time growing to the level that we have.
Okay. So what to kind of tie that together? What's the point where you personally have decided to stop hanging, uh, you know, new rounds of improvements on retention and conversion? Where does it level off for you? And you could even contrast that with, kind of the trade-offs of trying to go bigger.
Right. Yeah, it really depends on how big you want to grow the business because it's just a math equation. If
Right.
your churn is, let's say your churn is 10%, there and you can only get so much traffic to your site each month, using all the means you have. There is a mathematical limit to how big that business can get, period, unless you get more traffic, lower churn,
Right.
or increase prices. And so, assuming you've optimized your pricing and you're getting as much traffic as you can, you just have to say at a certain point, at 10% churn, like certain pricing, like you just cannot get physically bigger than say 20 or 25,000 a month. Like it cannot happen. And so you have to decide, well, is that okay? Am I willing to invest? Because it is diminishing returns, right? That first operation retention I did was a month. Well, it was 2 months worth of work, but it really wasn't, it was 80 to 120 hours of core solid time. Each one after that has been 2 or 3 times the length because there's no low hanging fruit. So you have to decide, am I going to put in hundreds of hours to get my churn down another point? Or
Right.
do I have other things if you have another business, as I do, will I get those hundreds of hours provide more value to my customers and me by investing there? So without getting too specific, that's kind of where it is. You have to ask yourself and you look at the numbers of like, am I okay? Am I okay with this? And if you're not in the ranges that I said earlier, then I would not stop. Like there's still, I think,
Right.
low hanging fruit until you get into those ranges.
Okay. Um, so again, kind of wrapping up, what are some of the key things you think people have to execute on, have to focus on in order to be successful improving these pieces of the funnel?
I think that you have to be systematic. I mean, I think it's obvious from what I've said. Everything is like step one, step two. It really
Right.
is that. Like it's just a system. It's like you're going to ask people who are canceling or aren't converting. You're going to send them emails, or you can even use, if they're not converting to trial, you can use like Pop Survey or Qualaroo or a similar thing that pops up a little survey and says, "Hey, is my pricing?" I mean, there's a number of tools to do that, and then figure out why they're not, and then group them together, and then create tasks to address those objections, whether that means building new features or educating or whatever it may be, and then you execute on that and you see what happens. And to be honest, the shorter your trial length, the faster you can execute on that. So that is one thing, I see some people with
Right.
60-day trials, like you kind of want to get that shorter so that you can repeat this process because it's not all going to happen the first time.
Right.
And then the next time, the subsequent time, it really helps to have a fresh set of eyes. So you can head it up, but by that time I had hired a product manager, and it was really good to have his set of eyes look at the same exact data and pick out some new things. So if you have to hire a consultant, which I would totally be open to doing, or have a colleague who's knowledgeable on it, it can help kind of unearth new things.
Right. So what if you had what if this was someone trying to optimize these things, but it was early on in the process? What uh, you know, if you have a data set that's really small, improving these things may pay off, it may not. You may not be very sure. So how do you decide which way to jump in a scenario like that?
I would focus on traffic up front because you need a bigger data set, period. And it's easy to fall in the trap because when you're early on, it's hard if you're a month into your app and you have, a few hundred uniques a month, you can't necessarily listen to someone who is way down the line because they're worried about different things. So it's like split testing with a few hundred uniques a month. It's just don't do it. It's completely not worth it, right? If you don't have enough traffic, then focus on getting traffic. So that's what I would say.
That's good advice. So since you're loaded up on drip, and a big part of it seems like conversion and retention for you and for a lot of other people centers around reaching out to customers, and then an obvious way to do that is email. What is drip, and how do you think it fits in to this picture?
Sure. So drip is the way I phrase it is it's the easiest way to improve conversion rates by reconnecting with drive-by visitors via email. So it's purely focused on the front end, right? It's like
Right.
conversion. It's not a retention tool at all. There are some awesome retention tools like Customer.io, Intercom.io, UserFox, UserCycle. There's a whole slew of them. They're awesome. But Drip, at least at this point, is all focused on that very first step, getting from someone visiting your site to starting a trial. We don't even go past the trial mark at this point.
Right.
It's all front end, and it's the URL is getdrip.com if people are interested. We're not launched yet. We are on a couple customers right now, but basically we try to make it really easy to get an email mini course up and running like across your whole website. So we have a little pop-up widget so that you can just install a tag and it appears everywhere. So you don't have to go
Right.
in and hack HTML or whatever. It just pops up a little bit, and then within Drip, as the customer, you're able to create. We give you like content templates for creating mini courses, so that you don't have to do everything from scratch. If you have old blog posts, it's easy to copy them in. And then we track everything, right? We track not only subscribes and clicks and opens, which most email marketing services do, but we track conversions. Like I want to see how many people clicked on an email and actually converted to trial, because that's what you want to see. That's effectiveness, right?
Right.
And if you're able to put in, hey, I can pay $20 per trial or $30 per trial, or that's how much it's worth to me, then you can actually see like how much did this email mini course make you last month or make you in the last year, and is it worth it? So that's it. And then we're working on split testing, which is pretty complicated, but that's not in there yet. But we want people to be able to split test mini courses, autoresponders, that kind of stuff, because no one else allows you to do it right now, like Mailchimp or Aweber or Constant Contact. They don't allow subject line split testing. So
Right. Yeah. I've got an email mini course on Mailchimp, and it's really tricky to test anything. Like, right.
yep,
Like, is the spacing on days
yeah,
right? Is the
exactly.
content right? It's
That's
really difficult. So yeah,
right.
that's cool. So where can people find you if they wanted to look you up, see what else you're doing, or get in touch?
Sure. Probably the best place is softwarebyrob.com. That's my blog. I don't blog as much as I used to, but I have an email newsletter. Basically, it's like tips for growing your startup, and that's available there in the upper right. So that's probably the most I'm active there. And then on my podcast, if you listen to podcasts, Startups for the Rest of Us is where I talk about exactly this stuff we're talking about here, 30 minutes every week, every Tuesday morning. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. I've been listening for a long time.
cool.
Well, thanks for coming in, Rob. It was good to talk with you, and I think we laid down a lot of interesting things people can work with.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yep.